Stallion, I've told you plenty of funny college stories, but I want to hear what was your best job or maybe most interesting job that you had in college? Because today's guest, by the way, before I set this up, why I'm asking Stallion this, today's guest learned about how to flip land. She has now done over 300 properties, still in her early 20s, but she learned about it as a college senior. So I'm not going to give you why it was interesting for her to figure this out, but I do think that we all have things that we did when we were either in high school or coming out of high school or in college. And it led us to saying, I never want to do that again. Stallion, what was the job that you remember most that probably was not necessarily the best use of your talents?
Well, I'll say this. As you mentioned, I had a lot of different jobs and I enjoyed most of them. But the one that sticks out to me that kind of was that linchpin that said, Joey, you got to get out of the fast food industry. Okay.
Goodness, yes.
The fast food industry is not for you. You're slow and you don't like the smell of chili dogs or root beer. I was at A&W Root Beer. Figure this out. I'm sitting there. I'm dressed to the nines. What I mean by nines, I got the A&W Root Beer polo. I got the black, cardboard pants on. Feels like I got the tool belt on that has the little change purse with the little, click it down. It's like ching, 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 ching. And the coins come out the bottom. And I got the roller skates.
You topped it off with the roller skates?
The roller skates and the visor. Okay. And I'm haphazardly getting to your car with sometimes gallons of root beer and chili dogs hanging off the side and French fries, just the smell of oil on my clothes at the end of the day.
What does the job interview look like for the A&W? Like, are you guys doing like races around the parking lot? Are you guys couple skating? The guy who can like skate backwards is a shoe-in? Like, what is the criteria to get this job, man?
Shockingly, skating was never brought into the interview. Okay.
They did that on you later?
What was brought into the interview is, can you get to work on your own? Can you drive here? Like, do you have a DUI? Do you have a record? Those are the main questions I had to get by. But yeah, they didn't ask me about skating. They just said, hey, by the way, if you want better tips, usually they give better tips to skaters. So me, I'm gonna go skate.
You had to go there. Well, speaking of job interviews, so one of the jobs that absolutely was a defining point in my life that said, you're not meant for manual labor. You're going to have to somehow use your brain or your good looks, which you are short on both. But manual labor is definitely not in the cards for you. I show up to a job interview for a company that was a landscaping company called the Garden of Eden. All right?
Oh, perfect.
I show up to a restaurant that the guy's already gone through the line and is sitting at the table. And I'm like, piss. I thought he was buying. I write a check for a $4 sub sandwich that ultimately ended up bouncing. That went to the attorney general's office. I paid $175, fine, plus the overdraft fees and everything else to get a job that I'd have to wake up at 6 a.m. That's after going to sleep at 5:30 a.m. to go to, work there for 6 hours, get off at lunchtime, come home, eat, fall asleep, skip all 3 classes I have that afternoon, and start over again. So that has nothing to do with today's podcast, other than, as you can tell, Joey on roller skates and me, manual labor is not what we wanted to do in college. And our guest today was working in summer internship. And as she tells it, was listening to what other people who were working full time were saying about their life. And she thought, maybe I should start looking into other ways to create passive income streams. It's super inspiring. I hope you'll enjoy this interview. Let's jump in right now with Michaela Sorney.
Welcome to the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast, your guide to understanding how to get out of the Wall Street rat race and start your own mailbox money lifestyle. Now, Don't let these handsome Southern draws fool you. These financial minds are teaching our country to enhance savings, increase cash flow, and create passive income, all without the help of Wall Street. Are you ready to break through? Now here are your hosts, Russ Morgan and Joey Murray.
Wealth Without Wall Street Tribe. Today we have a new investor, somebody that is starting at a very young age to inspire each of you to financial freedom. Join us today is Michaela Sorney. Michaela, thank you for being here.
Hi guys, how are you?
Oh man,
Fantastic.
Grateful to have you. I've been eager to have you on the podcast. To be interested, to be exact, we've been talking about this interview in our circles for the last probably 2 months. I don't know why it took Joey so long to make this happen, but grateful to finally have it. I want to take you back to a moment. You were driving in the car, I believe, on your way to an internship. And this podcast that you've been introduced to came on the radio, and it wasn't Wealth Without Wall Street, guys. This is not a plug for us, but this podcast came on and it got you super interested in something very unique. Would you take us to that moment?
Sure. So I was, like you said, I was driving to an internship. I was in college and I was hearing about land investing. Never heard about that before. And I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, okay, I was going into my senior year of college. Knew what I was kind of wanting to do. I was an engineer, going to school for that. But hearing it that it's fairly cheap, considering other types of real estate investing, fairly cheap to get into. Seems fairly simple. I live in New Jersey, and from what everyone was saying on the podcast, you could do this anywhere. So I didn't need to be around the property, so that was good. Kind of like a pro in my mind. I listened to a lot of other like residential, real estate podcasts. They talked about depreciation. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, you don't get the depreciation. That was probably the only negative that I could come up with because it was just pure land. So in that moment, I'm just thinking of, why not just give it a try? I mean, I hear these people and I figured I'll join the Facebook groups and stuff. And they were buying properties for a couple $100. So I was just kind of, thinking, let me just try something. I wanted to do, real estate for a while and just wanted to take the dive into it.
Okay, so wait, Russ. I have to jump in before you get going. How many people do you know going into their senior year that listen to all sorts of real estate podcasts or thought processes, and they're like, yeah, I really want to get into real estate, and going into their senior year? Like, did you ever hang out with people like that?
Me?
Yeah, you.
No, heck no, I didn't. Man, we were trying to figure out how to get a 12-pack for $5 or under. It had nothing to do with investing. That was the investments I was making, So Michaela, thankfully you weren't hanging out with people like me or Joey, by the way.
I didn't even know how to spell real estate in college.
So, but why was that interesting? I'm just trying to figure out, like, was there something like, was your family just entrepreneurs and they kind of like led you into this mindset? Where did that start?
So I was always kind of interested in real estate, but I think most people, you see the flipping shows on HGTV and you're like, you see the before and after pictures and that piques something in your mind. And you're like, that looks really cool. You see, they made $100,000 on a property. You don't necessarily see or realize the investment they put into it to make that 100,000, but they show big numbers and nice pictures. So I was kind of interested in that. It seemed cool to me. That was kind of the start of the real estate. My parents, I mean, they, did some renovations on their house. Nothing like they weren't flipping houses or anything. Then I guess, so I started in the podcast with like typical like turnkey, then it was multifamily. And I felt like they were just getting further and further away from something that I could actually start because they were more expensive, like syndications and everything like that. So when I finally got back to the land investing, I was very excited because it was like, hey, I could take action on this today, maybe build that up. And at the time, I still wanted to, maybe I'll flip houses, something like that. But it was an action that I could take that day and then hopefully, take a step forward rather than just keep waiting, saying, I'll work full time, then I'll wait. And maybe one day I'll save up enough money to invest. Like I could do that day.
So finally, an example where HGTV helped someone else, right? Like it inspired you to get interested into real estate, and ultimately you found a niche that fit where you were. I mean, there's so many of us that can relate to. I don't have large money. It doesn't matter where you are in life. I mean, obviously, as a college student, not having access to large amounts of money is normal. But even for people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, they don't have access to a large amount of money because they've tied it up in places like 401ks and home equity and other areas that they can't get to. So they too are like, well, those things don't make sense to me because I couldn't take action on that. I would love to take you back to what did you do? So you heard the podcast, obviously you listened to several episodes, but what was the first action step you took?
So I think the first one was basically just looking at the different websites of different, quote unquote, like land investor, people who taught land investing. So I looked at the different websites, and I consider the first real actionable item was for the Land Geek. I scheduled a free call. I was like, it's a free call. What am I going to lose? Let me just ask some questions. I did my research before that because I think if you go into those, they can be helpful if you know nothing and you're, maybe want to see the pricing of a package or something. But I wanted to, again, take action and make it useful. So I did my research I joined Facebook groups, looked at, like you said, listened to a ton of episodes, kind of had an idea, maybe some places I wanted to mail to, maybe some places that I could afford to buy property and do business in. Went on the free call, and Mike Zano actually talked to me on the call. So helpful. He answered questions that I think you'd be shocked that they give this away on a free call. So he helped me a lot kind of get started. So yeah, doing that call was first. And then I think before I really, overanalyzed it and overthought it and started to get, analysis process, I just started mailing. And when the responses came back, it just started.
I want to, before you jump ahead, because you just gave a nugget there, they actually answered questions that you would be surprised they give away for free. Give us a taste of what that is, because I think sometimes we're too scared to get on a phone call because we're like, oh, we're going to get sold something. I don't want to be on that call, right? So what were some of those questions that you had that they were answering that were so great that you were like, wow, I should have paid for that?
Yeah, I think the first one or the first one that comes to mind was pricing. So I knew kind of what areas, but Mike actually let me know what he was pricing and what the average, land investor was pricing in that area. So that took away, I think, one of the biggest hurdles for land investors at the beginning is when you're thinking, okay, I'm going to, even if it's 100 letters, I've never done this before. I have no idea what to price it. I don't know what I'm going to sell it as. I don't even kind of know where to start. So I just knew it was $100 for a half acre at the time. It's really rural county in the Southwest. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Mike said you can get $100 bucks. It's on the lower end. So that was number one. Number two was the actual county. So kind of explain my situation and then, Mike, hey, this is a good county. You can get land cheap here and flip it cheap and might be a good place to start. So I'd say arguably two of the biggest hurdles for people at the beginning, like I said, was answered on a free call. And I think I came to it kind of like knowing a background. I wasn't just like, hey, I want to invest in land. What should I do? They were pointed questions. And I think that helped.
So, but let me be clear. You didn't learn all that stuff through having bought a course before. This was just your very first step. So you just had listened to these things and said, I'm going to pursue this way, ask them a couple questions. And then you got started even without like the toolkit or flight school or any of those things.
Yeah, so all the background knowledge was just from like all the podcasts. I listened to so many of the episodes, read about it. I got started. I believe I sent the letters before I even bought the toolkit.
See, that's amazing to me because I think, and just to also talk about the fact of that being a free call, you would assume that you would have to have bought something for them to give you any sort of direction in this world, but that wasn't the case in your experience. So that's amazing to me. What did you do next after you just kind of took that shot in the dark and started sending out letters? What was the next step?
Yep. So the next step it was quickly after, but I did buy the toolkit. And at the time, I think there was kind of a shift where some people still bought the toolkit, but most, I think, were just jumping into flight school. But I was like, yeah, let me just try the toolkit. At the time, I had the time to work on this, I guess, as other like, professionals, they don't necessarily have the time, but they may have the money. I was the opposite. I had the time and not necessarily the money. So I was like, let me just try this toolkit. So I tried the toolkit. I had actually bought a couple of properties from it, which I've heard after is very rare and not many people do. So I bought a couple of properties through that. I actually sold my first property on eBay, which was also very rare at the time. So that was just a quick sale and kind of just like a proof of concept. And I was shocked, honestly, when it happened. I don't tell them that was the only property I've ever sold on eBay, but I saw it in the toolkit, and at the time I was like, okay, I'll try it. So the next step was the toolkit. I did that for a little while. A few months later, then I did flight school with the Land Geek as well.
Russ, I remember my dad specifically say to me, Joey, you gotta go to college. I don't want you to end up like me. And what my dad was saying is, in order for things to change, things have to change. You can't end up just like me.
Well, I think, we as parents, sometimes we take on the burden thinking about our kids and how we want something better for them. And we want to know, what will their future look like if I don't take action, if I don't do something different?
See, in my house, I'm the role model. You're your kid's role model. And the buck stops with you. It's time to take action. If you're ready to take action, join us at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/passport and get started on your own journey to financial freedom.
All right, let's jump back into this episode. All right, so you're going through this process. You're taking money from your summer internship to use it to send out mailers. You're actually getting responses. You're buying properties and turning around and selling them, which, yes, is unique for a lot of people, because they just don't take any of those steps, right? They're just not willing, or they have to get all the information, which I think is super unique because your background is training to be an engineer, right? And obviously many of us know engineers, and they're not necessarily risk takers. They're not someone who's willing to go and do something that haven't necessarily been tried and true, that they can use their past experience to help them. What gave you the confidence that you could do that?
I think you might laugh at this, but I think it was just like ignorance is bliss. I didn't really know what it involved. I was kind of just like, hey, I've listened to, Mark, feels like my best friend, listening to him on this podcast, hours and hours and hours, and all the guys at the Land Geek. And I'm like, well, it works. And then I joined the Facebook groups, and I was, seeing people on the Facebook groups that were saying it worked. And I think I was just so, I was itching to just make a move and just do something in hopes of, getting that financial freedom. So I think ignorance is bliss. I didn't overthink it.
Well, you say financial freedom, which is unique for someone that's still in college or about to get out, right? Because Joey and I used to be asked all the time to come speak to the medical schools, to the dental schools. And what I recognize a lot of times when we were up there sharing the message of financial freedom, it was usually like just kind of shoved to the side because they were so eager to go do the job that they had been going to school and being trained to do. But yet for you, for some reason, you had this eagerness to learn how to do something completely different than necessarily your training. Was there something specific that was doing that?
I think just the fact that I interned like a couple years, and each time it was like maybe 6 months. So I'd say longer than just the average, 10-week summer internship. So I feel like I was in the office more than maybe most college seniors at that point in their life. And actually one of my coworkers, this was one of the things, there was a couple, but one of my coworkers jokingly said, yeah, I'm around you guys, my coworkers, more than my family. And they were all laughing about that as if that was, and everyone's like, oh yeah, same, played it off like it was no big deal. And I was like horrified. But I guess it's true if you think of how many hours you spend there. So that was one of the things. And I think just, I liked my job back then. I like it now, but some days I don't want to have to join a call at a certain time. Like the fact that just the idea that you don't have to be tied down to certain times, certain locations is very, very appealing to me. And the fact that I don't forget where I heard this, if it was in a podcast or just, read it somewhere, but I've experienced this working, in my full-time job for a few years now. Every, year or 6 months, maybe you're up for a promotion. But in your own business, you're up for a promotion whenever you want to be, essentially. You want to make more money, go buy another property and sell it. Now you just increased your passive income. So I think that also is very appealing.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, the wisdom for you to be able to hone in and hear a coworker say that and then say, wait a minute, that doesn't line up with what I'm signing up for. Like, I didn't want to, that doesn't make sense to me. That's amazing. Talk about your friendships at that time. Like, you're in the middle of about to graduate and you've got friends and you tell them, hey, yeah, I'm doing this little thing on the side. I'm buying land out in the middle of nowhere and selling it to people on terms. Did they have any like place for that in their brain? Like, how did they respond?
No, I probably would say did not have a place for that in their brain. It's like, if you say real estate, okay, everyone kind of gets it. But then if you hone into land investing, everyone's like, what are you talking about? My friends know now, definitely. But back then, I think if I said, when I would tell them, they're just like, that's a little weird. Like, okay, I guess I won't ask any more questions. That sounds like it possibly could be a scam or something, or like, I just don't know what to make of that. At the time as it grows. And even with my family, like I didn't tell them, my parents, for example, until I sold the property because I wanted to be able to say like, hey, proof of concept, this actually works. Otherwise, they definitely would have thought it was a big scam. And they're like, who's taking, my daughter's money? But yeah, just very confusing for them, I'll say.
All right. Obviously, just being ramped up, right? Having the knowledge of how to do it is always an obstacle. But once you started rapidly learning it, clearly you're a very smart individual and you're willing to take action on the things that you find interesting. But what was some of the big obstacles early on for you as you were ramping this business up that would be helpful to someone else maybe in similar shoes?
I think some of my biggest obstacles, number one, was capital at the beginning. It's hard to kind of snowball it starting from very small. So I'd say capital at the beginning. Since then, I've tried a bunch of different things. I've, sold portions of my notes, taken on loans. I haven't done any profit split just because I just think the profit's too good to split that. I'd rather take a loan and pay like an interest rate. But I've tried different things. At the beginning, I kind of just wanted to keep it as simple as possible. So that's why I just, use my own money. I would wholesale properties a lot. But I would say, as a piece of advice, if you're in the same boat, maybe you don't want to take on debt or, sell portions of your note, you kind of want to keep it simple. Wholesaling is definitely still a good option in my mind. I made a lot of money from it, snowballed it into buying a ton of property. At this point, I don't do it because I can also sell them. But back then, I also didn't really have the sales team and didn't have the marketing team. So it was hard to sell them to an end customer. And then, if you sell them on terms, as everyone knows, it takes time to get your money back. So I'd say a piece of advice is maybe try wholesaling at the beginning. Another thing that was hard.
Hold on, before you go on, just so everybody's clear, what does wholesaling mean? Just if this is the first time they've heard us talk about land flipping per se.
Yeah, so what I would do is I would send the offer letters to the owners, just as everyone else does when I would buy that, instead of trying to market it and maybe sell it for terms to like an end customer who, for example, wants to build on it. I would just sell it to another land investor. The rule back then, at least, and I'm not sure if that's the case now, because like I said, I don't sell wholesale anymore, but back then it was like the investor you're selling to should be able to, double or triple their money depending on if they sell it on terms or cash. So you leave a little bit of meat on the bone for that as well. You get quick cash. Usually they can be like repeat customers as well.
You also said something in there that I want to reach back to, which is I don't do profit splits because the profit is too good to split. For those who don't understand land flipping, what is the profit?
It could be thousands of percent in infinite return, for example. Sometimes I would even go on to say a decent amount of times I'll pre-sell a property for example, for cash. So I'll buy it for just example purposes, maybe 5,000, sell it, have it pre-sold for maybe 7,000 or 10,000 cash. And at that point, it's infinite. Depends on obviously the terms, but it's pretty incredible.
Pre-sell it. How do you pre-sell land?
So I like to do that with my repeat customers because we have that, connection and that relationship. There's trust there. I don't necessarily do it for new customers, usually just because, the last thing I want is to have a deal and then they go and they look at the county and it's not in my LLC yet, even though, it's because I'm closing on it. So it's usually for like repeat customers who I trust them, they trust me, and they said, hey, can you let me know? Or I'll say, hey, I have this property coming up. Is in a certain area similar to your other property, or it's, similar in price, for example. And they'll just say, okay, I want it. They'll do their due diligence and usually they'll wire me first as I'm closing. And then I just kind of keep the difference. And that's where the return's incredible.
This is genius, by the way. And here's another thing I want to ask the question. I think somebody may be trying to figure out, why do people buy multiple pieces of property, right? Like most of the time in our minds, we think of, I want to buy a piece of property so I can build my home on it, maybe a farm on it, maybe a place to go hunting. But I don't usually have multiple places like that. Why are people buying multiple properties?
So my customers that do that, and I'll note that these are residential. So like you said, if maybe someone wants multiple hunting properties or places to camp, these are purely residential. Like you cannot camp on them. You can't do anything. You're supposed to just build on them. So the customers that have bought these are usually just like, they don't trust the stock market. They want a hard asset. A couple of them are like Canadian or in different countries, and they just are fascinated and think that the American like real estate market's an amazing thing to invest in. That's what I find that most of the people, repeat customers, are buying for.
So would you say, Michaela, not to put words in your mouth, but they're looking for wealth without Wall Street? Would you say?
That's the perfect way to, I don't know why I didn't think about that.
So give us some context. Yeah, you sold some properties. Like how many properties and how long of a time frame?
So I started the end of, or summer, I guess, of 2018 was when I started listening to the podcast and everything. So since then, I've sold hundreds and hundreds of properties. Obviously, with the real estate market last year, most were cash last year, which was great. And now I'm seeing more terms again, to kind of give you a little perspective.
And which one, do you have a preference? Do you like selling for cash? Do you prefer people to pay on terms? Every land investor we talk to has a different niche of what they're interested in. For you, do you care?
Yeah, I don't care too much. I do obviously like a mix. It is great when the cash comes in, but then it's amazing, in a couple months when 10,000 comes in passive income. Like, so I like a good mix.
What has been some of the new things that you've been trying in your land flipping business?
Sure. So since last year, when the market obviously grew a lot, prices went up a lot. I'm trying to kind of channel and reach out to a different type of clientele, not necessarily the clientele that wants to buy for $100 down and $100 a month. My properties are more expensive than that now, by far. So what I do is now each property I'll get professional photography, and they put together professional drone video. So in that drone video, it's obviously video of the property, and then they put like little marketing like bullet points essentially describing the property. So I get that done on each one, and I also list each one on the MLS now. So the new kind of marketing, lead flow, what I'm doing now is I get the property, I get the photographs, I list on my website as well, which I didn't do at the beginning, but now I'm listing everything on my website. I list it on the MLS. I list it on the land networks, so like Lands of America, those websites, Land Flip. But I'd say MLS is probably the biggest difference, and it's something that I don't think many land investors do.
And what has been the value of doing that? Have you seen some meaningful profit in going more higher end, more professional photos, putting them on a professional real estate type site like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. Listing on Facebook, also had a lot of accounts flagged on Facebook and stuff like that recently, and other investors that I talked to did as well. So I think that was one of the reasons why I was like, we need a different avenue for these leads. And leads are completely different. In Facebook, you can go through 100 or plus tire kickers who just say, is this available? And then you never hear back from them. But these from the MLS, and would even say from like the land network, are very, very good leads, high percentage convert, and I'd say way higher percentage also are interested in purchasing with cash rather than financing.
That's awesome. I love how you're constantly innovating to try to make this a true business that continues to grow for you. How do you see the future from here? Like, obviously you're still employed, you love your job, and you have this great side business. What do you see as like the future of this?
Ultimately, I do want the financial freedom, which, started this whole thing a couple of years ago, but that's what I see in the future. I haven't mostly hired out the business, so at this point, it's just scaling. I actually I went on a 2-3 week vacation in Europe a couple weeks ago, so it was very interesting to see like where the bottlenecks were, where I'm actually needed. So that was really insightful. So just working on some of those bottlenecks, and in the future to keep expanding. And yeah, the financial freedom to be able to live off the passive income.
Man, Wealth Wall Street Tribe, did you hear what you just said? Just got back from a 2 to 3 week trip in Europe, and she was spending time there thinking about a business that is paying for the whole thing and how she can enhance that. Like, if that doesn't inspire you, if this doesn't say, hey, Michaela has showed a path, it just takes grit. It doesn't take tons and tons of money, but it takes action. Michaela, I've been waiting for this podcast for so long, and you delivered. You crushed it. So grateful to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing this. I have one last question for you, though, because lots of people have been wondering, is land flipping the thing for them, right? And there's lots of steps within the land flipping learning education process. Would you talk about all those steps that you did as far as the education part, and if there was any that were more valuable than others? Because I just want, again, one of our greatest friends is Mark Podolsky and their team, but obviously they're kind of passionate and about their own thing. But I love hearing from other people who've gone through the process that can help someone else on the sideline understand what is super important for them to take action on.
Sure. So to start, what I did, like I mentioned, I mailed some offers before I bought anything. Then I bought the toolkit shortly after. A couple months later, I did flight school. All of this with the Land Geek. I did the flight school. That was, I think, about 6 months, maybe, give or take. Then for 6 months after that, I did my own thing. I felt like those gave me the tools to kind of get started. I was interested in coaching, but I felt like I wouldn't necessarily get the most out of it because I wasn't super advanced at the time. So I did my own thing for 6 months. And then after that, then I did the year-long coaching with the Land Geeks. And I think each thing was as valuable, just in different stages of the process. I think if I started with coaching, I might not necessarily, like I suspected, have gotten the most out of it. You can ask very advanced questions there. You have all of the coaches, all of their knowledge. You could also ask basic questions and get just as much out of it. But I think I really got the most because I was advanced at that point. To me, the coaching, I say this to Mark too, I was like, it's invaluable. Anytime you have a question, they're there. Just write it. At the time when I did it was Basecamp. I'm sure they have some other tool now, but you just write your question there. You have the calls. They hold you accountable. But that was kind of the step that I do. And then after coaching, I did boardroom with the Land Geeks, and that was a couple more months. And that's kind of like other people who have gone through the program. You kind of have your own group and basically run it yourself. But after that, I've just been doing my own thing. I think another thing that helped that's not necessarily a paid program is just starting your own masterminds with people. So a couple of people have reached out, and we just, jump on Zoom calls and talk and brainstorm. And those have been invaluable as well. And the relationships are really helpful too. And, you give ideas, you just brainstorm. And the more you talk about it, ideas might come to you. You might hear other people's ideas. So I think that's really helpful.
Oh, so Russ, what I heard Michaela say, by the way, Michaela, thank you again for being willing to come on. Michaela had a goal. She built a plan around it, and then she had to have the support. It sounds just like what we talk about here on Wealth Without Wall Street, the GPS system to get you to financial freedom. You heard it from Michaela. It's time to take action, tribe. Get going on your own journey to financial freedom. If you don't know where to start, you can start with us at wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/passport and take that very first step of getting your goal so you can end up just like what Michaela's doing here. Thanks again, Michaela. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.